Hey there, and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Yoslo, and this is my Season 8, Episode 2 discussion for Game of Thrones. Last week we returned to Westeros and had some awesome reunions and mistrust, and this week we had more of it. But it definitely felt more like a goodbye to most of these characters than a reunion, because I feel like in the next episode, Episode 3, during the battle, most of these characters that we were kind of having this nice heartfelt episode with are no longer going to be with us after that episode. So we start out in the Great Hall, and Jaime is on trial for all his past deeds that he has done towards the Targaryens and Starks. First, Daenerys starts by stating what she and her brother Viserys were going to do when they finally had the Kingslayer in their grasp. And then Sansa brought up how her family was almost wiped out thanks to the Lannisters. Good thing for Jaime is that Brienne's honor, she was able to convince Lady Sansa that Jaime is largely the reason why Sansa's even alive, because he outfitted Brienne with great armor and a Valyrian steel blade, which she named Oathkeeper, also showing that Jaime, although he has betrayed oaths before, he has also kept his oaths when it mattered most. Creepy Bran did his best to make the situation awkward. What we do for love, quoting Jaime in episode 1 of season 1, nodding to Jaime that he knows what Jaime did but doesn't reveal it to everyone. Next, Bran and Jaime have a conversation, and Jaime apologizes for what he did to Bran, further showing that he has changed. And Bran says, "If you hadn't pushed me out that window, you would still be the Gold Lion, and I'd still be Brandon Stark." Also further insinuating that Bran is more than human now. Another thing that Jaime brings up is why Bran didn't out him as the culprit that pushed Bran, which Bran responds, "We can't use you in the war to come if everyone murders you before then." This makes me feel that Jaime is vital to the battle versus the Night King. First, Bran calls him an old friend in episode 1. Next, he says that Jaime had to change by pushing Bran. And then Jaime is needed in the war, and Bran outing him would have not allowed Jaime to be utilized. Jaime and Tyrion have a nice conversation while Starkmen spit at them from afar, showing that mistrust between families still. And Daenerys and Jorah have a conversation about how Daenerys is being a bit too harsh to Tyrion, his mind behind him and all his talking that he does that maybe annoyed Jorah on their trip from Volantis to Meereen. Kinda, the talking doesn't matter. His mind is just so much better, and he learns from his mistakes, and Daenerys needs to utilize him better rather than chastising him every time that he makes a mistake. Dany is also asked by Jorah to talk to Sansa and heal the mistrust, where she lets Sansa know that Jon is the one who convinced her to come north and not go for the throne due to the White Walker March. He isn't being coerced by Dany, as Sansa thinks. Sansa still doesn't trust Dany, though. If they win the battle, once they win the battle, that she won't force the North to kneel. Next, Theon returns, and his arc through the show has been a roller coaster like Jaime's, and he is going to help defend Bran from the Night King, possibly foreshadowing his own demise, in service to the Starks who made him who he was. Sansa also has a strong connection to Theon due to their common torment that they both received from Ramsay in the earlier seasons, and when he had eventually saved her. Grey Worm and Missandei discuss leaving Westeros after the war when Daenerys is on the throne and return to the Isle of Noth, where Missandei's from, before she was taken as a slave. Grey Worm tells her that he will protect her since the people of Noth don't defend themselves, they're pacifists really. And a fun fact about Noth is that there are butterflies that defend the island and its inhabitants from foreigners. They give any visitors to the island a sickness that kills them if they stay too long on that island, which helps defend the natives from attack. And if you're wondering how Missandei was ever taken from them, the slavers found out if you come at night, the butterflies are asleep and they can't defend. So I feel this could be a foreshadow for Grey Worm's ultimate demise in the battle to come. Because if they're going to overlook that, they're not staying true to George's vision. And I feel like either Grey Worm has to die or maybe even Missandei. But I feel like it'll be Grey Worm because he'll be in the front lines with his Unsullied. Next, the horn blasts, alerting the arrival of Tormund, Beric, and Dolorous Edd. Jon goes to greet his old buddy from the Night's Watch and is side grabbed by Tormund and hugged, showing that friendship that they have. Jon reunites with them and is informed that the Night King has already taken Last Hearth, and anyone not already at Winterfell has been added to the Army of the Dead. Thanks House Glover for not standing with Jon and the Starks. Jon then goes into his speech, "Our enemy doesn't tire, doesn't stop, doesn't feel. And they are getting more prepared thanks to this new info from Tormund, Beric, and Dollar said. Bran then tells them that the Night King is after him specifically, and that the target that the Night King actor had talked about before the show had aired is Bran himself, and that the Night King wants to erase history and have a night that goes on forever, kind of just delete the history of all mankind. And I think this is interesting because back in season 7, Archmaester Ebrose, who was kind of like the teacher for Sam, said to him that the Maesters are like Westeros' memory. And if they didn't have all of the stuff that they have on history and science and all that stuff, humans would, like the rest of the humans on Westeros, would just go kill each other and they wouldn't really have anything to live for. They wouldn't have a memory. So it's pretty intriguing that Bran, as a three-eyed raven, is like the other memory. He's the memory that has actually seen everything, unlike the Maesters, who can be a little more on the speculative side because they don't really trust certain things that have happened. And Bran has seen everything that has happened before. And he also says that the Night King has been going after different three-eyed ravens throughout history. So let's say that the Night King's been alive for 8,000 years. There's probably been a couple, I would say my guess is around 50, if they live a couple hundred years, being hooked into the weirwood net, and he's been trying to kill them ever since, but he's never been able to. Bran is the final one. He's been marked by the Night King, and he's going to be used as bait. And that is where Theon comes in and says, I will defend Bran because I had taken the castle from you once, and I want to repay that debt. I think Sam is the logical person to help Bran write a history after the battle is done, if they both survive, and it'll be a Song of Ice and Fire. As I said in my theory video, it'll kind of be like a little Lord of the Rings nod, where Bilbo wrote The Hobbit and Frodo wrote The Lord of the Rings. Next, Davos and Gilly are feeding and helping the women and children, and they're moving them to the crypts, where it's apparently safest. And honestly, the number of times they say it in this episode makes me feel like it's not gonna be safe. Dany says it to Tyrion when she's convincing him to stay down there due to his mind being important and not his prowess on the battlefield. Gilly says it to the refugees. Jorah said it to Lyanna Mormont, and Gendry says it to Arya. Maybe once the Night King raises his arms like he did in Hardhome, he will raise all the Kings of Winter and past Starks back to life. And an unfortunate thing, I thought of this theory as I was writing this script for this episode, is what if the heroes do win the battle versus the Night King, but anyone in the crypts ends up dying due to the Night King, and the heroes go to see all of those people that were down there and they're all dead. I mean, that's just terrible, but I just thought of it, and I mean, like, the foreshadowing that they do in this show seems like this could be possible, and I'm super nervous because there's a lot of characters that are important that are going to be in the crypts. Okay, moving on. Davos has a moment with one of the refugee girls, who also so happens to have a facial scar, or burning, that definitely reminds him of Shireen. Rest in peace. Next, we got Arya and Gendry, who are making weapons. Gendry's making the weapons, but Arya shows up and realizes that Gendry was making weapons for others before making hers, and she says, you need to make mine first, and you need to make it strong. And then he questions if she will actually want to fight death, as he calls it, and she assures him, with her knife-throwing skills, that indeed she will be happy to meet this new face of death. So then Tyrion and Jaime reminisce about the first time they arrived in Winterfell all those years ago in season 1, when Tyrion enjoyed whores and Jaime was a renowned knight. Now they both are so different than they have been before, and in comes Brienne and Podrick to join them by the fire to just relax before this ensuing battle. Next, Arya is practicing her bowmanship, and Gendry arrives with her weapon, specially designed for long range since she's more of a shorter stature character than other people are, so she's going to need that reach, and her training with the Faceless Men with those kind of bow staffs is really handy. And also, I was wondering if maybe the Dragonglass part is detachable, so she can use that and her Valyrian steel dagger for close quarters. Not sure, we'll have to see. Next, Gendry lets Arya know that he is Robert Baratheon's bastard when she starts questioning about what Melisandre did to him, and it kind of piques an interest in her. I thought that was interesting. She then goes on to let him know that if this is their last night, that she wants to experience, and everyone watching closed their eyes as she began to undress. She has as well literally grown up from the age of 11 to 22 on the show, and it is just kind of weird. It's like I don't know, a lot of people that I've been listening to talk about the episode says it's kind of like younger sister vibes. So yeah. Anyways, although I feel it needed to happen, I just didn't know when. A passage Robert said in season 1 to Ned, "I have a son, you have a daughter, let's join our houses." Back then, he was referring to Joffrey and Sansa, and that they could merge their houses that way and rule the Seven Kingdoms, but that wasn't really his son, it was Jaime and Cersei's. And so I think it works that Gendry, by being Robert Baratheon's bastard, is his true blood, and Arya is Ned Stark's daughter, as well as Sansa is, and it just took a while for them to finally get there. 8 seasons to be exact. Next, we have the Fireplace group, Tyrion, Jaime, Brienne, Podrick, and in comes Davos and Tormund, who is of course eyeing Brienne and thinking of all the giant great beasts that he can make with her. He also decided to elaborate on his title, Giantsbane, and that he was 10 years old, killed a giant, and then slept with the giant's wife. Unknowing to the giant wife, she begins to breastfeed him because she thinks that he's her baby, and he says that's where he gets his strength, that it comes from the giant's milk. And then he goes on to guzzle a horn of fermented goat's milk, and he definitely feels like the comedic relief of the episode. When he first arrives, he's like, is the tall lady still here? And then he's always trying to like get closer to her, and she's kind of just like, I don't even know, because you're like a wildling. And as everyone stared at each other in confusion in that scene where he was drinking on the milk, I thought it was just hilarious, and I laughed a lot. They did then bring up that Brienne isn't a knight, and she scoffs it off like, I never wanted it anyway, even though it is in every fiber of her being to be a knight. And Tormund says, if I was a king, I'd knight you 10 times over. Again, getting some laughs. Jaime then interrupts and says, you don't need a king. A knight can then knight someone else. You don't need to have a proper king do it. You can just have someone else that's already knighted give the process to them. And he says to Brienne, kneel, and I will knight you. And she is hesitant at first, and he persists. Do you want this or not? And she looks at Podrick, and Podrick's kind of like, I know you want this because I've been traveling with you for so long. And she finally decides to go over there. She kneels down, and this is the best scene of the episode for sure. The reason why the episode's called A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. She's kneeling, and everyone in the room is watching. Jaime say the words, in the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. And in the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the innocent. Arise, Brienne of Tarth, as a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. So that was awesome, and it's also based on the Andals, who started knights and with their Faith of the Seven. And those are 3 of the different faces of God in their Faith of the Seven: the warrior, the father, and the mother. There's a couple others, but those are the ones that are needed to knight someone. Now, fun fact about a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, as he calls her. This is the name of a 3-part novella story that George R.R. Martin, the creator of Game of Thrones, wrote about a man named Sir Duncan the Tall, who was a knight around the same time as Maester Aemon of the Night's Watch when he was in his youth. He is, in fact, the Kingsguard, the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, to Maester Aemon's younger brother, Aegon V Targaryen. Now, why this is interesting is that it is insinuated that possibly an ancestor to Brienne is actually, in fact, the same Sir Duncan the Tall, because she's unusually tall. He was like 7'5", if I remember correctly, to the genealogy and the history. Anyways, I thought that was kind of cool how they kind of mixed that all together. So back to this episode, Jaime then is able to finally show to her that he has grown, or at least left the corruption, and he left the persona of the cocky knight that he had in season 2 and 3 when she was taking him back to King's Landing. Everyone claps, especially Tormund, and then Podrick reveals what he did to those girls back in season 3, singing, and he's good at it. Of course he's good at it. I mean, he's just like so much different now than he was all the way back then. He's like training knights now because he was trained by Brienne, and he's a good singer, and he's kind of just got everything. So it's kind of interesting, a character that started out as just a squire is turning out to be so formidable. And I feel like it's scary because he might end up dying, because you can't have too many good things, otherwise it'll bite you back eventually. So anyways, he starts singing a song called Jenny of Oldstone, and it's actually a song that was played, and I think it's called Jenny's Song in the book, and the first verse that he sings is actually in the book, and she was a commoner who was said to be descended from the children of the forest, and she was a little cuckoo, and anyway, she also married a Targaryen. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, it was actually that same Duncan the Tall, Kingsguard to Aegon the Fifth Targaryen. His son, Aegon the Fifth Targaryen's son, one of his sons, married Jenny of Oldstone, which was a bad thing to do because it ended up hurting the claim with House Baratheon back then. So anyways, I'm kind of sidetracked. Jenny of Oldstone is just this character in the history, and Podrick apparently knows the song for that. And as he sings, it pans over Winterfell, showing everyone as they prepare for the battle. Sansa and Theon are together. Sam, Gilly, and Little Sam are getting a night's rest before they have to go to the crypts. Arya and Gendry, Missandei and Grey Worm, and finally Daenerys as she confronts Jon about after a whole episode of Jon avoiding his aunt. So she comes to him and asks who he is paying his respects to in the crypt, and it is Lyanna Stark, his mom. And I'm sure everyone sat there saying, here it is, he's finally going to say to her who he actually is, and it's going to get awkward. And after she talked about how everyone said Rhaegar was so good and kind, all these stories she heard of him, and then there's the story of how he raped Lyanna. And Jon finally has to step in and say he didn't. He loved her and she loved him, and when he died to Robert Baratheon on the Trident during Robert's Rebellion, Lyanna gave birth to a baby, and as she lay dying, she told her brother Ned that he must protect her son from Robert, who hates Targaryens. And so Ned adopts Aegon Targaryen as his bastard Jon Snow. Daenerys, at this revelation, can't believe it, kind of how Jon didn't believe it when Sam first told him. She's very throne hungry, as it was stated through this episode, and her whole character arc through the whole show has been the one goal of making it to the Iron Throne. So hearing that there's someone that has a better claim to it because he's actually in the direct line, she's kind of off the side on the line, and she doesn't like it. So he doesn't get enough time to tell her that he truly doesn't care about it, even though she is like, thinking this has to be a mistake, and Jon's never one to really lie, so why would he lie to you? And you love him and trust him, so I hope nothing bad ends up coming to this. I am curious to see if Daenerys maybe will hesitate to save Jon, maybe when he's in trouble during the battle, because of this reveal, and he never had time to really explain to her. So that is really interesting, and I wonder if that'll actually prevent her from letting him ride Rhaegal again, because in a lot of the trailers, you see Jon running on the ground, which I personally think he'd be better on the ground than in the air, but he does know how to fly a dragon now, so it would be useful for him to do strafing runs and burn the whites and all that. Anyways, the episode ends with the horn blasts that deny him the opportunity of explaining anything to Dany, and the army of the dead has arrived. And look at all those Craster baby boys all grown up, lining up. Gonna be a great next episode. This was my discussion and breakdown of episode 2 of season 8 of Game of Thrones. Hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe for more, and comment with anything you noticed about the episode. And I will see you in the next video. Bye.